Let me just say, before we get going, that we're all going to get to know each other really, really well today. And I have to wear a tie on occasion, but I think by the end of the day, I'm going to be in kind of my board shorts and sandals. And so let's hang out. Let's make this, a good conversation for all of you. I'm running the show up here, so I can stop anytime, take your questions. We can have a really good day getting to know one another. And then, where's Camille? Camille, we have a really good lineup of drinks at the end of the day, right? Good. And the beach is across the street, and the oil slick hasn't hit here. So we'll have some fun. But it's really great. Ed Rendell, let me just say a few words about Ed Rendell. He is known by many in the kind of iconic sense as America's governor. He's been someone who has tirelessly been raising these set of issues about infrastructure, which we're going to discuss. But I was just thinking, because I was a co-founder of a think tank many years ago called the New America Foundation. I've been at the Atlantic, and I've asked Ed to speak on trade, on infrastructure, on jobs, and there hasn't been a single time that he hasn't accepted the invitation. So I just want to say thank you, because we're running you doggedly, and but either you really like me or you care about the issues.
Both.
So Ed, thank you very much for being here. So let me just start. You wrote a book that I love, and I don't know how many of you read it, but it's worth it. It has a classic title, A Nation of Wusses: How America's Leaders Lost the Guts to Make Us Great. And some might be put off by the title in a way, others would run toward it. But if you get into the guts of it, it's a highly detailed, beautifully written expose on essentially the deficits in leadership and smart things like infrastructure. And I'm interested, since you wrote that book, what, about 5 years ago?
2012, right?
Yeah, so what do you think has happened? Because you've been on TV everywhere talking about Amtrak, your anger at the Congress about cutting Amtrak's funding virtually at the time when they need it more than ever. But give us a snapshot of what is burning in your soul right now about this deficit in leadership in the country, particularly on infrastructure.
Well, America's always been the leading economic power in the world because we've been willing to invest in our own future. We've been risk takers. We were risk takers when we decided to go to war for our independence. We're a nation of shopkeepers and farmers daring to take on the greatest army and the greatest navy in the world at that time, owned by the British Empire. But we did it. And at every time, a critical juncture in this country's history, we've made bold investments in our own growth. And it's worked. When Jefferson was faced with a decision on the Erie Canal, his engineers told him it was too difficult. The Congress told him it was too expensive. He knew it was the only way we were going to open up commerce with the Midwest. He went ahead and did it. Abraham Lincoln, fighting the Civil War, understood that if we were going to continue to grow as a country, hopefully after the war was concluded, we had to build a transatlantic railroad system. And he did it. Dwight David Eisenhower came back and understood that if America was going to achieve its full economic greatness all over the country, we needed an interstate highway system. And he invested tons of money at a time when many people said, you're running up too much debt. But he did it. That spirit of willing to take on challenges, it seems to have disappeared.
Did you send a copy to President Obama?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
Did he say thanks?
No. but it's not just the president. Although Steve's right, the president sets the tone. The president has to, any executive, mayor, and the mayors will tell you this, governor, president, you have to be willing to take the hit and say to your legislative body, follow me, I'll take the hit, and invest. I was on a Sunday morning TV show back in 2010 when I was still governor with Mike Pence, who at that time was the ranking member of the Budget Committee, who's now the governor of Indiana. And they showed me a clip of Mike Pence, and he was pounding the rostrum, saying, yes, we're the party of no. We say no to spending. We say no to taxing. We say no to tolling. We say no to borrowing. And then the moderator asked me what I thought, and I said, it's a prescription for disaster. Name me one American company that has grown successful without investing in its own future. So Fox invited Congressman Pence and I back the next Sunday. He started first, gave the same riff, and it was my turn. And normally, as you know, Steve, we're supposed to look at the camera. But I turned to Congressman Pence and I said, Congressman, you seem like a reasonable guy to me. Truth was, he didn't seem like a reasonable guy to me. But I know you want to be the nice guy.
Yeah.
You want to be the nice guy on TV.
Yeah. It's a Machiavellian ploy.
Right. I said, tell our viewers how we're going to maintain our roads, bridges, and highways in safe condition if we don't invest in their maintenance. There's about 12 seconds of silence. On TV, that's eons of time. I could see Congressman Pence, who's a very smart guy, struggling to come up with an answer. And his answer was, there you Democrats go again, using the word invest when you really mean spend. No, we mean invest. If we stop investing in ourselves, in education, in research and development, and particularly in infrastructure, we are cooked.
So I have had the privilege of interviewing people like Senator John Thune, who is chair of the Commerce Committee in the Senate now, Bill Schuster, who handles transportation. I can't find a Republican right now in those committees opposed to infrastructure investment. So what's the debate?
Well, any of you remember the Dire Straits song, Money for Nothing and Chicks for Free? That's what the Congress wants. The Congress wants some...
I think that's a tweetable moment.
The Congress wants some manna from heaven to fall down so that they can invest money without having to raise their hands and vote for a revenue increase, which is why we're going through the repatriation farce. I would support repatriation because it seems to be the only thing on the table which will give us a 4 or 5 or 6 year highway bill. But what's wrong with repatriation? We're doing this, we're getting money reinvested in America at a lower tax rate. But what's wrong with it? When it's done, it's done. And when the 4 year or 5 year or 6 year bill is over, we're back where we started from. We have no structural change in the way we fund infrastructure in this country. We've just kicked the can down the road. Now, this is the longest kick we've had. You know, the highway bill has been kicked down the road. They've done continuing resolutions 33 times since MAP 21, 33 times. And as of May 31st, the Highway Trust Fund is out of money. And in the heart of the construction season, road, bridge, highway construction will grind to a halt in this country, not only failing to create jobs, but causing significant layoffs of those middle-class jobs that every politician says they're in favor of.
You know, one of the things we're here to talk today in the next few hours is about the connected city. People may not remember, because your governorship was so stellar, that you were mayor of Philadelphia. And becoming mayor of a city may sound cool, but it sounds like you're hit day one with an unbelievable set of messes and knots. Running a city is really complicated because there's no one really more on the front line than the mayor. One of the things that I think is part of our discussion today is you jump ahead 5 years, 10 years into the future and look at what cities are going to become. You know, cities where sensors are connected to everything, and we're going to have a very different world. But getting from here to there is complicated when you're inheriting a real city with all of the current messes and realities there are. So when you were mayor of Philadelphia, can you take us back to that and give us some insight in how you transform and change a city? What were your experiences in Philadelphia, and what are the insights today?
That's a little off topic in the sense that the first thing you have to do, the problem with being mayor, it's a great job, it's fun, you're the first responder, you roll up your sleeves, you can influence your city's populace because you're the center of the media attention, but there's no revenue. Governor is less fun, less hands-on, but you've got the ability to raise revenue to tackle significant problems. So the first thing you've got to do as mayor is find a way to save every available dime by doing things more efficiently, more productively.
I thought you were going to say become pals with the governor.
No, well, that too. cutting waste, changing work rules that are inefficient, and then taking the money that you save and using it to invest in things that you need. It's essentially what we did in Philadelphia, and what we did again when I became governor. I raised about $4 billion a year more we spent on public education than when I became governor. And we did it mostly from the savings we were able to implement over the 8 years that I was governor. So that's the first thing you've got to do. You've got to find more revenue. Second thing you've got to do is you've got to spend the revenue more wisely. And I know you're going to have a panel of mayors who are doing just that. And in infrastructure, there are ways to spend the money more wisely. For example, bridges. Every city, every state has tons of structurally deficient bridges. But we tab them as structurally deficient because we have visual inspections by engineers. They do a pretty good job, but they can't tell you which bridges are the most structurally deficient, which bridges are in the most danger of actually collapsing. Well, there's technology that's now been developed that can put sensors on the bridges and that can give you a constant readout, warning signals of when a bridge is getting really in peril as opposed to just obsolete. And you can save tons of money by putting your resources where they're really needed. It's like an
Is that data going to scare the hell out of us? In the sense, it reminds me that in the U.S. government, if we have 5 or 6 different intelligence areas, and sometimes we don't want them to meet and come to a decision because we're afraid of the answer. Would you be afraid of all that data being fed on how many bad bridges we have?
You should all be scared of crossing virtually all the bridges in America. Amtrak on the Northeast Corridor runs the passenger rail runs over 7 bridges that are more than 100 years old. The average lifespan, recommended lifespan for a bridge is 40 years, 100 years old. The Laborers Union, the International Laborers Union, did a campaign in Pennsylvania and Indiana. When a bridge was structurally deficient, they put up a billboard and said, "The bridge you're about to cross is structurally deficient, call Congressman Jones," and they gave the congressman's number. I called up Terry O'Sullivan, the head of the labor union, and I said, "Put a billboard on the other end of the bridge because we want to get national attention and say, 'Glad you made it.'" That would have been on the evening news. That would have been
There are things like we're discussing now nationally, like a national electric grid, high-speed rail, which Jerry Brown is pushing in California and others. Do you feel that those large-scale transportation infrastructure projects help pave a way to kind of a broader discussion of other forms of infrastructure, or do they detract?
Well, sometimes they detract. When we were talking about Amtrak, a couple of congressmen from Nebraska and Oklahoma, I saw them on the air. They said, "Why should we give money to Amtrak? It doesn't help our citizens." And I was on a show, and again, they showed that clip, and they came to me. Just because the people of Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore, Washington, Boston, our taxes are used for agricultural subsidies. And the last time I looked, we didn't have any farms in our city limits. We're one country, and we pay for all the things that we need in every region. But when you have a big project, even a project that does some good, it conjures up, oh, it's going to come from our money. So what I would recommend is that we have an infrastructure revitalization program. Every one of the G20 nations has gone on a 5 to 10 year infrastructure revitalization program. Japan, a fifth of the size of us, spent $1 trillion above what they had been spending in a 10-year period to repair and revitalize their infrastructure. We need to do that. We need the basic money for transportation and for water and stormwater to stay where it is. Basically, block grants given to the states via some formula. So nobody gets cut. But then we need the big money to be put before a body like an infrastructure bank, like the European Infrastructure Bank, which does a great job, made up of academicians, former state Department of Transportation secretaries, investment bankers, and makes decisions based on a cost-benefit analysis. Are we going to invest in high-speed rail in the Northeast Corridor? Are we going to invest in commuter in rail tying Houston and Dallas together? Are we going to do multi-state projects? We had a glimpse of what multi-state projects can be in the stimulus program, the much maligned stimulus program, which actually did a whole lot of good, in something called Tiger Grant. Tiger Grants were competitive dollars that the Secretary of DOT could give out, and states could combine to go for those grants. In Pennsylvania, again, I was governor during this time, we combined with 5 other states on 2 grants, and one was for Norfolk Southern, and one was for CSX, and we virtually rebuilt with about a third state money, a little less than a third federal money, Tiger money, and a little more than a third from the companies. We revitalized freight rail in the eastern half of the country. So we need a source of funding for regional projects, and those projects should be decided on merit, not who's the most powerful senator or the longest serving congressman. And we can do it. There's no question we can do it. I remember once testifying before a Senate committee, and I said, the American Society of Civil Engineers, Building America's Future, we all recommend an additional $2 trillion of spending, $200 billion a year for the next 10 years. And the senator said, well, we all agree that there should be infrastructure spending, but we don't have the money. And I said, yes, you do. You just spent $2 trillion fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Five years before they started, you had no idea you were going to spend the money, but you found the money. And we can find the money for anything we want that has a benefit to this country. And repairing our infrastructure right now, our intellectual infrastructure, as well as our physical infrastructure, is the most important thing we can do.
Are you going to pound on all the I mean, you are one of the people that really does pound on presidential candidates, whether you're in your party or not. I know you're pals with Hillary, but are you going to pound on Hillary to make infrastructure a priority?
Absolutely. I mean, Building America's Future is absolutely adamant that we're going to have an infrastructure forum, and we're not going to let the candidates get away with saying, I believe we should invest in infrastructure. Yes, but how do you propose to get the money to invest in infrastructure? And by the way,
so you have Ray LaHood in that?
Ray LaHood, myself, Michael Bloomberg.
Mike Bloomberg.
Actually, Arnold stepped down.
He
stepped down when he was doing the movies, but Arnold's biggest contribution to Building America's Future was at our first press conference held on a California freeway not far from here in 2008. He said the problem was no one knew what infrastructure was. And back in 2008, that was right. He said his 8-year-old son saw it on his schedule and said, Daddy, what's infrastructure? And Arnold said, he replied, what Daddy used to blow up in the movies. and when you think about it, it's probably as good a definition as any. As good as, but I would recommend it because I know that a lot of people are very interested in the nuances of this. People say, well, Congress is never going to vote for revenue. And they probably won't. Bob Corker, a great, solid conservative from Tennessee, sponsored a bill with Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, to raise the gas tax 10 cents a gallon and adjust it to inflation. And he couldn't get one Republican co-sponsor, not one. Now, I want to ask all of you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Raise your hands if you know exactly what the federal gas tax is per gallon.
What is it?
18.7.
18.7 cents.
You had about 5 out of 100 people, which is about the ratio when I do this at every conference. You could raise the federal gas tax 10 cents a gallon and nobody would know. Nobody would know. Because the price of gas,
an Iran ship went to Yemen or something.
The price of gas is affected by so many things other than the tax rate. It's silly. It's silly. In Pennsylvania, as in a lot of states, we raised, after I became governor, with a Republican governor, Republican legislature, I helped the Republican governor, we raised the gas tax over 5 years by 28 cents a gallon, on top of what we were paying. We produced $2.3 billion each year for roads, bridges, highways, and mass transit. And not one legislator who voted for it, Republican or Democrat, lost at the next election. Not one. Not one single legislator. So it's really important that we get this right. We can't let the candidates off the hook. We've got to have leadership. One of the things, President Obama made a big mistake in stimulus by only putting $70 billion in the infrastructure. Out of the $850 billion, $70 billion was infrastructure. Barbara Boxer and Jim Inhofe, arguably the most conservative senator in the U.S. Senate, tried to get the administration to triple the amount of infrastructure spending. Instead, they devoted $350 billion to a tax increase. And it was done for some political reasons, some to attract Republican votes. We didn't attract any Republican votes. And if we went out into the streets of Los Angeles and said to people, did you get a tax cut from President Obama's stimulus? How many out of 100 would say yes? 0, 2, or 3? In fact, everyone who made less than $250,000 got a $1,000 cut if they were married from the Obama stimulus. It was wasted. It was wasted. It didn't get invested in the economy. It didn't score any political points. We should have tripled the investment in infrastructure. Look, the bottom line is, one thing Americans understand is you get what you pay for. You buy a $10,000 car, you have no right to expect, and you don't expect that it will run as well and last as long as a $30,000 car. People understand that. And the American people get it. They don't like paying taxes. They'll grumble about paying taxes. But interestingly, on a referendum for transportation infrastructure, 74% in the last 10 years have been approved. 74% have been approved. In red states like Texas and South Carolina, approved. Because the people in Charleston knew that they needed money to revitalize their port, that the port was the key to their economy. So they voted a half penny increase in their sales tax. Simple as that. But what we need is some leaders, some legislators with the courage to raise their hand and say, yes, I think we need to do this. I think we need to spend more money on infrastructure. And this is the first way to do it. It's not the only way. And I know we're running out of time, but for those of you who are interested, there are ways to pump money into infrastructure spending without actually increasing the federal deficit or debt. Brookings has a thing called the Hamilton Project. And the Hamilton Project has an infrastructure division headed by Roger Altman, who used to be with, as you know, a friend of yours, used to be with the Clinton administration. And the Hamilton Project infrastructure lays out 4 areas that you can put tens and maybe hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure spending without increasing the federal deficit. I'll just give you 2. The program called TIFIA, the Transportation Infrastructure Financing Authority. Very successful. It loans out monies to projects. It loans money to governmental projects. It loans money to the 3 public-private partnership projects. And
it gets a lot of leverage. It generates
10
leverage.
to 1, $10 to 1. There have been 58 TIFIA loans since the program started. Only 2 have defaulted. The program charges a little bit of interest, so it pays for itself. MAP 21 increased TIFIA from $225 million to $1 billion. Hamilton Project recommends, and so do I, $10 billion of authority next year. That would produce $100 billion of infrastructure spending. Secondly, Building America's bonds, BABs they were called. They were part of stimulus. During stimulus, they are not tax exempt bonds. They're not like municipal or state bonds. They are not tax exempt. The federal government paid 35% of the debt service to the states and cities. They're bad. They lost money. But at 28%, because taxes are collected on the bonds, the federal government, it's a wash. So we recommend putting back the BABS program. The federal government could operate it at essentially revenue neutral. And again, BABS in just the last 6 months of its existence, the last year of its existence, produced $183 billion of bonds. Because the municipality, and are the mayors here or are they in the green room?
No, they're here. Yeah.
Mayor, if the federal government was willing to pay 28% of your debt service for, you'd sign on tomorrow, right?
Rusty, we're going to start at that when we're up there later. Everyone, this is our mayor of Riverside, California. Here, he's super cool. He flies helicopters. We'll get to that later. Yeah.
So those are 2 ways to do it without even it's money for nothing, chicks for free, and we can't get them to do that.
You know, I want to go to the audience and at least get a couple of questions in, but I want to ask you a quick question about Amtrak because it made you so angry. I mean, I've got just reams here of Ed Rendell quotes that you know, where he's, what's wrong with these guys, referring to Congress? What, you know, they're not doing anything. If they're not, you know, if government should do anything, if people they shouldn't run for office, they should stay home. I mean, you were just blasting the government for what happened with Amtrak. Do you think Amtrak and what happened in Philadelphia is enough of a spark to get a change, or do you think in 3 weeks this will be forgotten and the battle goes on?
3 weeks, this will be forgotten. When the bridge collapsed in Minnesota, everyone was up in arms. We have to do something. 4 weeks later, boom. When the bridge collapsed in Washington, in Skagit, Washington, same thing. We've got to do something. The pipeline burst in Malibu. We've got to do something. How many tragedies is it going to take before we decide to do something? And I was most angry that they've always starved Amtrak. I testified for Amtrak once, and Senator Shelby from Alabama seems like a nice man. Not really. No, he did seem like a nice man.
He's watching right now on the streaming live video. Hi, Richard. No, I'm just joking.
Want to bet? Senator Shelby said to me, "Governor, are you aware that we subsidize Amtrak, but the riders don't pay the full freight?" I had everything I could do to restrain myself, and you can see I don't do that very well. But I said, Senator, there isn't a rail line in the world, inner city, city to city, coast to coast, that isn't subsidized. You can't name me one. Why would you expect Amtrak to be any different? You go to Europe and Asia. I rode the Japanese maglev, 317 miles an hour. And you can stand up, take out a pencil and paper, and write a note without your hand moving an inch, right? Because it's 6 inches above the ground. It rides on air. It's unbelievable, the technology. And they've built 50 miles of track for Japanese maglev. The Shinshin, which averages 225, celebrated its 50th year in operation. 50th year in operation. Shinkansen. Yeah. And they've had no fatality in 50 years. It is absolutely unbelievable. The Acela, which is the fast train on the Northeast Corridor.
Semi-fast.
Well, it can go 150 miles an hour. But our track is so curved from Washington to Boston that from Washington to Boston, it averages 80 miles an hour. 60 years ago, we had a train that averaged 70 miles an hour. Wow.
Let me take a couple of quick lightning round questions. I believe in people getting a chance, but we're right near the end. But questions, comments, make them cool. Yes, right here. Lindsay's got a microphone for you. Here you go.
Introduce yourself to start.
Tell us who you are.
I was looking for you.
Since we're spending the day together. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Donna Mariosh. I'm
Hi, Donna.
a policy circle member here at RAND. Very much enjoyed your presentation. Glad to have this group out here at our fabulous.
Okay, you've used your minute.
Fabulous pursuit. There's a quick question, so I can get to it. You were talking about the gas tax, but now with the large improvement, a major improvement in fuel efficiency with cars, the gas tax is maybe not the panacea that it used to be. And with electric cars, of course, it might be even worse. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, Representative Blumenauer for Oregon has a bill that would raise the gas tax, but phase it out over a 10-year period and move to a vehicle miles traveled. And there is technology. The big knock against vehicle miles traveled was, I don't want the federal government tracking where I drive my car. Well, there's now a technology, a company by the name of Verdeva out of Massachusetts, can go pump to pump. All it has to know is pump to pump. And they're piloting a program in Maryland, the District of Columbia, and Delaware. So I think you will see within a decade vehicle miles travel placing the gas tax.
Just to wrap up, because we're out of time, why doesn't Building America's Future have its own presidential debate and have these folks come in and see you guys?
Because they would have, we're going to try, but they will avoid us like the plague. Because the answer is, I mean, if I was moderating the debate, I'd say Senator Corker, a conservative Republican, Senator Murphy, a progressive Democrat, recommended a 10-cent increase in the gas tax with an index to inflation. Would you favor it? If so, why? If not, why not?
We only have time for one more question, I've been told. How about right over here?
Thanks. Hi, I'm Chris Rico. I'm the Director of Innovation at the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation.
Oh, great.
First of all, I want to thank you for your patriotism, because more than fighting wars overseas, this, to me, is what patriotism looks like. And the question that I had...
He's also one of the founding organizers of the Museum for the American Revolution, so he's a patriot in the old regular sense, too.
That's sort of like double bottom line. Why is it that the companies that would have a vested interest in the money that they could make off of this don't band together to lobby for this the way that war profiteers do?
Well, that's an interesting question, and they actually do. But unlike companies that benefit from defense contracts, we used to have an organization before Building America's Future called Rebuild America. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was made up of people who were contractors, engineers, road builders, you name it, investment bankers, everyone who would benefit in a pecuniary fashion from increased investment. And we had one public official at the head, Bob Lanier, the mayor of Houston, was head for a while. I was head for a while. But it was easy to disparage us because we had a vested interest. So when we built Building America's Future, our membership, our mayors, governors, county commissioners, no private companies. We'll take support from private companies, but no private companies for that very reason. Defense, defense has always been the sacred cow. I heard a congressman say, we can't do anything for Amtrak because it would bust the cap. Well, the budget cap. They busted the budget caps to high hell for defense just, what, 3 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago. So defense is in a different league in a different area.
But I would also say, just to intervene here, that in USAID, for instance, on international aid abroad, there's a group called the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition that I like and see what they do. But it's essentially the people that get USAID projects. So they're the ones that benefit. They're the ones that host it. They're the ones who organize it. They've created that. So it's a very, very interesting notion.
People went on without support and help from the private sector. Siemens, perfect example. The CEO of Siemens spoke in Infrastructure Week in Washington just last week at a thing where the vice president was the keynote. So people are speaking out. And again, I agree with you. Even if a company makes some dollars because of it, that's not why they're speaking out. They're speaking out because
It makes sense.
our infrastructure is crumbling before our eyes. And you said 25 years ago we were best in the world. 11 years ago, the World Economic Forum ranked the American infrastructure most competitive in the world, number one. We now rank 16th behind Malaysia, Iceland, Chile. Yep.
Behind Iceland.
Behind Iceland.
That's another tweetable moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Ed Rendell, I just want to say, Governor, that you really do represent, more than anyone else I know, what a smart conversation on infrastructure looks like. So thank you so much, my friend. Thank you. Thanks, Governor.